We're going to do something really interesting here. I think, one of the great things about this day is that we have, and just this morning, we saw 4 incredibly unique and different perspectives on what we do as leaders and we want to do as leaders. And there's a certain amount of inspiration that comes from that, from bringing people in from outside organizations and people from beyond our borders. But what we really want to do is balance that inspiration with some practical realities of people who are doing business right here in this country. And the reality is, because it's really easy to say, oh, you should fail fast. But what's the practical reality of that? And how do you implement that on a daily basis? And what are those challenges that people are facing? So that's what we're going to do. So we have 3 amazing panelists who are going to come out, and we're just going to talk about some of the content that has already been covered off or will be covered off in the remainder of the day. And then I'm going to come out and we'll do some Q&A from you folks as well. So for the last 10 to 15 minutes of the panel. Does that sound like a plan? Okay, awesome. So I'm going to, maybe I'll come out, well, I guess this is my chair. I don't want to mess up the guys with the mics. So please welcome our first panelist. He is the Chief People Officer for ATB. Please welcome Lorne Rubis. This is my chair. It's a little backwards.
Thank you, Ron.
Hello, Lorne.
Appreciate it very much.
No problem. Why don't you have a seat there? And there's your mic all ready to go. Lorne, I'm guessing that the woos were from ATB team members who are in the audience today.
I love them. Yeah. Thank you, ATB. And all of our customers that are here as well.
Oh, okay. Yeah. All right. I was going to say, the customers are down here and the ATB team is back there? Is that? No. Senior management, middleman. Okay, great. So Chief People Officer, can you just describe that role for us?
So the mandate that I've been given on behalf of our board and our CEO is with all my teammates out here is to make sure that ATB is the place to work. It's a very aspirational view and vision for the company. We measure it, and we believe that if we do that right, then we're going to take care of our customers and our shareholder.
That's awesome. That's great.
Yeah, I love the role. Best role in the country.
Yeah. A wonderful, wonderful organization. So thank you for being here.
Yeah, we're grateful to be here.
Okay, so next, please welcome the founder and CEO of Benevity, Bryan de Lottinville. Bryan, come on out. Welcome, Bryan.
Thank you. I feel like a rock star.
You feel like a rock star. Wait till they start throwing the socks at you. That's what people do with rock stars now. Bryan, why don't you tell us a little bit about Benevity?
First, has anybody heard of Benevity would be a better question. Hey, some hands. Well, these people work at Benevity, but we're the best little company that no one's heard of, really. But we're a Calgary company, a B corporation, that provides employee giving and volunteering software to some of the most iconic companies in the world, including Google, Apple, Microsoft, ADP, even ATB.
Yeah. and Apple, Mike, those are other organizations?
Yeah, it's crazy.
Microsoft is a client of ours, and I'm using the new Microsoft Surface Pro 3. I don't know if you can tell. And Bryan, what is the biggest what's the biggest benefit? Because obviously the employee giving side is obviously hugely beneficial, but from an engagement standpoint, is this something you're finding? Why would Apple do this? Why would they encourage that?
Increasingly, particularly in the U.S. relative to Canada, but it's coming here as well. Companies are recognizing that the goal of these programs is not fundraising; it's engagement of their people, hopefully around something that's emotive and resonant to them, and that aligns with the company's brand and community investment initiatives and some of those sorts of things. So it's really an engagement tool, one, not a silver bullet for it, but an increasingly relevant feather in the human capital management quiver.
Awesome, great. We're going to get back to more on that on the engagement side. Finally, please welcome our final panelist. He is the CFO and interim president of ADP, Russ Wong. Hello, Russ. Welcome. Thanks, Ron. Thanks for coming out. You can have a seat right there. And I'm just going to move my chair a little bit so I can see you guys better. There we go. So, Russ, I'm sure most people know what ADP does, but they may think that ADP only does a small fraction of the services that you guys actually deliver. You want to tell us a little bit about the stuff we might not know about ADP?
Yeah, thanks, Ron. So most of you would know us as the market-leading payroll organization, but we are also one of the largest human capital management organizations in the world. So as you consider your HR services and your technology, please keep ADP in mind.
Yeah, and you just became interim president as Greg went for duty into the U.S. So you're double duty right now, CFO and interim president. Did you give yourself a raise?
So we'll probably talk about that afterwards, but that's a great idea, Ron. Yeah, making the shift from CFO to president of a Canadian organization is happened recently, and it's a fantastic opportunity.
That's great. All right, awesome. Well, welcome, and thanks to all three of you. This is great. I wanted to start. The New York Times published a rather scathing article on Amazon. On the culture of Amazon, the expectations of management of their people. And, I don't know, I thought we were past the era, of, hey, if you're not here on Saturday, don't bother coming in on Sunday kind of approach. Are we past that, or are we expecting people to work longer and longer and longer? Lorne?
Well, I hope we're past it. The idea of using time and time in the office as a measurement of results, being able to develop others and to collaborate is such an antiquated thought process. And, frankly, I was encouraged to see the scathing article of Amazon. I thought it brought a great conversation, and I think that organizations have to be thoughtful about promoting an environment for people to be complete and to integrate their work and life in a way that they have a lot of control over, but the organization's very thoughtful about. I hope we're way past it.
Yeah. And then, Bryan, you're kind of a smaller, younger organization at this point. Is this something you think that is just defined by, entrepreneurial organizations or even in the tech sector?
Well, I agree with Lorne. I think it's more, I think the corporate ethos for more forward-thinking companies is more about impact and less about time spent. And I think that applies whether you're a relatively small or growth stage company or a very large company, but it comes down to whether your culture and your operational practices are aligned with that. And I think certain cultures, are good for companies. I mean, Amazon has a very specific culture. We might not like what we read about it, but it's obviously a very prolific company. Our company tends to attract people who have a higher than average appetite for pro-social behavior. So we tend to hire people who believe what we believe, and so we have some natural alignment with some of those things.
Yep. But Russ, isn't there's a, how do you stop the competition, right, of the people within an organization like, whew, I worked till midnight last night. And then everybody else thinking like, oh, I guess I gotta kind of pretend like I'm working till midnight. How do you stop that competition?
So I think it comes down to the leadership of the organization and the culture as well. If the leaders are exhibiting that type of behavior, then that is going to perpetuate throughout the organization. So it's a matter of leading by example. And Amazon, very successful organization. We may not aspire to work in that type of environment, but you look at their stock price and it's a little bit difficult to argue with the results. Yeah. The question is, an organization like that, is it sustainable when as one piece of that factor of working there, and if it starts to change, whether people will continue to work there.
Yeah. Are there practical things that you guys do as leaders to kind of squash that? Like some people say, like, I never return an email after 6. That's my rule, but it's always just because I'm watching baseball or something. Like,
I first have to say I'm struggling with the glare off my forehead in this thing, but
that's okay. Our apologies to the back half of the room who are blinded by Bryan.
It's like, yeah. We don't try and quash responsive behavior at all hours. What we tend to do is try and make sure that our environment is a meritocracy. It's not visible hours. It's not even where the work is done. We have a very liberal working from home policy and stuff. We'll see how long we can last with some of these things, but the ethos of our company is do the right thing, or shared responsibility, or some of those things that are easier, frankly, for a 150 employee company than a 50,000 employee company or a 5,000 employee company.
Right. I think you have to be really careful to judge if someone's working at midnight or someone's working early in the morning, or I think we have to let go of that time-based judgment and open it up. People work in all kinds of different ways, and I think the leaders need to reinforce that environment. And some of the joking around whether people are leaving early or working late, I think, some people refer to that as sludge. I think that gets in the way. The mindset has to change.
Okay, so I want to move on. Some people would say that we're all free agents, right? I mean, there was a time when our fathers or grandfathers went and worked at Westinghouse for 45 years. They got the watch, right? And that was it. And now it's like, hey, we're all free agents. Everyone's going to a seminar to develop their own personal brand. Everyone's got a blog on the side, everything else. So if we're all free agents, does that absolve the organization of being responsible to developing leaders? If they're just going to leave at some point, what's the point?
So I'll put my CFO hat on, and the question I would ask is, well, if you invest in these people and they are free agents, what if they leave? But then I'll put my CEO hat on and say, well, if you don't invest in these people, what if they stay? Yeah. So I think you have to be smart. I think you have to be smart about the investment in the training. It is a fact of life. You do need to take that into account. I think of it as table stakes, and it's only one thing that factors of why people stay, but I think it's an important part.
Yeah, that's awesome. I typically just phone headhunters and get them headhunted out. I don't know if that, no. I'm kidding. Sorry, Bryan, go ahead.
Just to add to that, I mean, I actually think the ease with which people can move across companies, sort of current economic climate in Calgary notwithstanding, actually requires that companies invest in them more, because you need to create a compelling place for them to work, and which includes, not to talk about sort of millennials more than is already the case, but they have certain expectations and needs, and you need to tailor your workplace in order that it's going to be an attractive place. And part of that is, as Lorne was saying earlier, work-life integration, personal and professional skills development. I mean, we all need to invest in those people.
Yeah, and counterintuitively, and not to be glib about it, but I'm excited about the idea of headhunters, recruiters lining up to find people out of ATB, because I hope they say no.
Yeah.
But and our view is that it's very difficult for any of us to offer any kind of statement of continuous employment. That just doesn't make any sense in the world we live in. However, our commitment is around the personal equity of every single person, and we believe that if we invest and they become richer in every way, obviously financially and experientially, emotionally, and their well-being, even spiritually, based on companies like this, that they will want to stay and flourish in that environment. Everybody's going to leave, but if you leave richer, then I think we've made a real contribution, and we've got a contribution back.
That's awesome. Great. I want to spend just a couple minutes on succession. We talked a little bit about, Bryan, on the millennial side of things. How are the next generation of leaders different? the people coming up that are kind of that next, they're just kind of stepping into leadership roles. How are they different than the establishment that's there? You're all looking at me like, I'm not answering that.
I'm happy to respond this way. I think the attributes and the values of leadership have a sustainable consistency to them. And the idea that you have to get great results, you have to develop others and be great at collaboration, I think that will have a continuous kind of outcome attached to it. What I think has changed dramatically is the combination of focus, speed, and agility. I think just because, you know, this is probably, for all of us here, the slowest it's ever going to be in terms of change.
Right.
So as we go forward, you have to have leaders that have the ability to get great results and to do all that in an environment that just requires that combination in a much more acute way. And we have to look for that. We have to be able to find it, measure it, and grow it.
Right. Right?
Yeah. I also think, you know, any discussion of leadership is kind of a microcosm of the broader discussion of what attracts, engages, and motivates every employee. Some will become leaders, some won't. But if you're not figuring out what the new breed of employee needs, which means, you know, kind of looking a little bit at how they differ from my generation. You know, in our business, it's a tangible difference. My generation, for instance, gave to the United Way. That's how they, you know, I'm not sure where the money's going. I'm not sure when it's landing, but I'm pretty sure there's some good being done. Today's generation in that area wants transparency, accountability, interactivity. They want a webby interface to do those things with. And it's just an example of how the same goal is achieved very differently. And I think the transparency piece and the accountability piece is really important in a workplace and a culture. And that's something that you want your leaders walking the talk on.
Yeah. And sorry, go ahead, Russ. Yeah.
I was going to mention that my hope is that the leaders that are coming up behind us are going to be a hell of a lot better than we are. And if you think about even more broader, not just the ones that are stepping into those leaderships, but I look at what my kids are doing today and the exposures that are getting in the elementary and the university and the high school. They're doing so much more and focused even at a leadership with team building, you know, presentations, so much more than what I did going through the school. So they are being exposed at a much earlier age to these concepts. They are much more self-aware. You know, my kids have gone through the colors assessments and you know, when my sons are red, etc. So I think all of that exposure early on is helping them become more self-aware. And you know, I can't predict where that's going to go, but I think that is just going to, you know, increase the amount and the capabilities of their leadership.
Yeah. And how old are your kids?
So my kids now are 15 and 18, okay. But even, you know, 5-10 years ago, you could see this happening. So I'm not sure what the elementary school kids are doing today. It's probably even accelerated that much faster.
That's fine, because I was thinking that when you said my kids, and I thought, he looks rather young. His kids are probably like 4 and 5. And I'm like, wow, like Myers, like, there's like, first stage of kindergarten is a Myers-Briggs assessment. I meant that as a compliment. I hope you.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Just,
sorry, Bryan.
I would be remiss if I didn't just add to that. I mean, the social responsibility and community kind of orientation of this, you know, society generally is at a much higher level. And so I think future leaders will, you know, we're a B corporation now. I expect that at some point in my lifetime, there won't be such a thing as a B corporation, because it'll be like the Nexus card. That line will be longer than the regular line. But all companies will be hybrid in nature. They will recognize that they can pursue profit and pursue improving the world at the same time. And arguably, it's an imperative.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned that the next generation of leaders they're looking for transparency in how they're dealing with the organization, and in your case, they're charitable givings and contributions. Is that, and we certainly know consumers are looking for that, right? Consumers are looking to do business with the brands who are open, honest, and transparent. Is that laddering up, though, for them to how they're behaving as leaders? Are they behaving in a really open, honest, and transparent way? Are they kind of communicating with complete candor? Or is there a gap there between what they want and how they behave? Lorne, are you seeing that?
I think we expect it out of leaders, but one thing I think leaders have to be comfortable with is that if it can be posted, it'll be posted. If it can be rated, it'll be rated. You know, I think we're working on it right now, a glass door of leadership, so that people can openly give leaders feedback. And so leaders are going to have to be very comfortable with multidimensional feedback and to take it as a great learning opportunity. Mindset around that. So the transparency is going to have to be there, and if it's not there, then it'll be exposed.
Yeah, Russ. Yeah.
I think transparency is very easy to say and very difficult to do. You know, when you think about certain situations. So from my experience, you know, on the financial side, transparency and integrity very, very important. But when you're faced, for example, with a restructuring,
yeah,
you know, how much do you communicate? How soon? And there are varied degrees of thoughts. You know, some companies like to keep it under wraps until the entire project and plan is known and you have all the details worked out, and then you say, here you go. And there are pros and cons to that. The other, way that I've tried to do it throughout my organization, throughout my experience, is to, when we're starting to think and starting to plan about this, even if you do not have the total plan together, is to start socializing that and bringing that forward to your employees.
Yeah.
And I think, my experience is that they've appreciated that, but there's a lot of risk, and that might not be the common thought out there, because you tell people and this is what you're planning to do, they're going to leave, right? Those sorts of things. So you got to take all of those things into consideration, but transparency is very, very important.
Yeah,
I think the trust that we can put in people to be able to participate with this, I think, is worth it. I had to restructure my organization within the first month that I got there. We took a third of the organization out, and the first day I told them, I'm going to do this. Yeah. Probably a third of you won't be here, and it's a very open and transparent thing to do, and you can feel the anxiety that goes with that. But I think people trust and appreciate that a heck of a lot more than walking in one day and saying, "There's the email, you're
surprise!"
Gone. Surprise, yeah.
No one wants to be surprised.
No one's been. There's we did something with Susie Welch, who's absolutely brilliant, and she had such a.
You mean as opposed to us?
yeah, sorry, yeah. Well, certainly as opposed to me. But the line that I love is that truth and trust in an organization means there's no meeting before the meeting. And I got back to the office that day. I was like, that's it, no more meetings before the meetings. And anytime somebody comes in to say, can I just talk about, Jared? I'm like, yeah, sure, let's get Jared in here, because there's no meeting before the meeting. We're going to have the meeting now. And it's funny how people's tone changes, right? And how more collaborative they become when they actually have to be transparent about their own opinions. Sorry, that was a slight tangent there. Yeah, no meeting before the meeting. And so how are you handling succession in your organizations? I mean, certainly different for you two than Bryan. For you, let's start for you, because you founded it. Do you have an exit strategy already, or are you looking for people to come in and backfill your responsibilities?
I'm the opposite of Russell. I'm old with young kids, so I can't put the tools down anytime soon. But it is different for us. We're maybe a little less calculated about succession planning and more focused on identifying leaders and high potential people and investing in their development and things like that. But we recently got a large institutional investor who wanted to get a big life insurance policy on me, but more importantly, want to make sure that there is a succession plan in place. And so we have been thinking about and looking at that issue. And for us, we're a relatively small company still, but our growth trajectory is significant. So we're looking for people who have, balancing between people who can grow and people who have been there and done that. And
right.
and that's That's our challenge is for software as a service companies in Calgary that aren't in oil and gas. There aren't a ton of people who have been there and done that.
Right. Was that not the coolest moment of your career? Somebody coming in and saying, we need an insurance policy on you in case something happens. Come on, that's got to make you feel pretty special, no?
It makes my backpack heavier, frankly, but...
Fair enough, okay. Russ, how are you planning
Succession planning. I mean, ADP is a large organization, well established. So we have a robust succession planning system. For example, our employees can go in and something called Career Driver, which they can input their goals. They can look at the training involved. They can look at stretch assignments, and that then serves as a point of discussion where they can start having those plans and talk about it with their managers.
Yep.
I think, though, you can have any great system that you want. The point is that it has to be ingrained within the culture and actually be used by the leaders. So it's not this once a year sort of, hey, let's talk about succession on an annual basis. You have to integrate it every single month where we talk about it, we review candidates, talk about strengths, weaknesses, leadership capabilities, etc.
Right.
What I think has been missing out of a lot of succession, and I've been part of 60,000 person organization and small organizations, is that people talk about wanting to have great leaders and they want these leaders to succeed. But oftentimes there's there's not as much intentionality and clarity about what exactly are you looking at. If I'm an aspiring leader here and I'm going to continue to succeed, what does that look like? We've tried to declare exactly, we believe people deserve great leaders. Leaders have a responsibility to be great, not perfect, and we've tried to lay it out there as clearly as possible and then use our succession process as a way of bringing evidence around whether people are really living within that framework.
Right. So does that mean, like, how are you assessing now to see, you've got this plan in place, but how are you assessing the people, whether they're in or they're out?
Well, there are three, as a result, you better show, first of all, you've been able to get extraordinary results. So where's the evidence? There's a lot of evidence around.
Yeah.
The data, in fact, the data's sitting there, it's mining it, that's important. And then you've got data around whether that person has really developed other people. Has that really happened or not?
Yep.
And do people really want to work for that person? Are the people lined up? So at those three outcome levels, you can get a fair amount of evidence. And then you look for evidence around whether they're good at the practices that you expect, the attributes and the values, and there's tons of evidence, and it has to be more than, oh, let's just have a conversation, have a picture of Ron on the paper, and then is he a good guy or not a good guy? So we're trying to bring as much evidence behind that as possible from many different angles as we can.
Right. Russ? Yeah.
Yeah, and the leadership competencies that we use as an example, it's not just around people leadership. We also have measurements around business leadership, and we also have measurements around market leadership. So those are kind of the three leadership competencies that we look at.
Right. Now, when you're looking at, Lorne, when you're looking at whether somebody wants to work for that person, are those, you're evaluating that at the same time as you're evaluating the leader with respect to the results?
Yeah. You're looking at it as a whole. Is this leader a whole leader in a complete kind of way? Because some people get great results, but they just beat the heck out of the people working for them, and it's not we don't find it sustainable, right? They're a flash in the pan. So you've got to do this for long periods of time, but that is a real clear piece of evidence. If people are lining up to work for you, there's something that's telling you about that particular leader.
Right, right. And Bryan, how are you assessing people within your organization?
Well, we're quite focused on our culture. It's a big reason why we've succeeded, because it translates into a really client solution oriented group of people, but around social responsibility. And so we actually recruit for a list of attributes, not exclusively, but and there are some things that wouldn't surprise anybody and others that might, like humility is one. And so for us, leaders are also who is typifying kind of who we perceive Benevity to be, both internally and externally, and are they walking the talk? And we try and reward and celebrate that type of behavior so that not only for leaders but other people within the company, they learn what works. And so getting back to your earlier comment, what works isn't just putting in hours. What works is typifying who we want to be and reinforcing the culture in the company.
Yeah. Within the larger organizations, are you taking things like, every organization's like, these are 3 values, right? They're on the wall behind reception, and it says accountability and innovation and creativity or something like that.
People are our most valued asset.
People are our most valuable asset, yeah. But do you look to see whether people are tightly aligned with those very, very specific values that you've identified in your brand documents, or is it more holistic and flexible than that?
So what we do, we have 7 values, and we don't try to assess on all 7, and so we tend to focus on a couple. Not that, we have 3, for example, that we've been focusing on for the last couple of years. And it's not to say that the other 4 are not as important.
Right.
So we focus on, I believe in the rule of 3 anyway. I can't remember more than 3 things on a list anyway. So we focus on those 3.
And what are those 3?
What's that? So each person counts.
Yep.
Service excellence and results driven.
Good.
So those are the values that we are focusing on at my current organization. And then we have the measurements around that. They are tied into people's goals. They're cascaded, and it is standardized throughout, and everyone understands that it's not just the poster on the wall. It's you actually have to demonstrate in how you live and what you do to drive these values.
Great.
So we're a 77-year-old organization, and we just took 4,000. We're going to take all from March 4th through our story and our 10 ATBs with a full time of a full day with each person and an evening going through the intentionality behind these 10. Because I think, there's this great picture of Enron with their values, right? Integrity, whatever.
Yeah.
And but people have got to understand what do you mean by that? What is the language? How do I tell a story in the context of where I work in the company and really make it personal, make a personal connection to that particular value? And that requires huge investment intentionality. Can't put it on the wall.
Right. We heard from Captain Phillips, and obviously, we don't have the opportunity. No, it's not an opportunity. We don't have the circumstances that we would ever be put in that type of situation. But it's also a metaphor for kind of organizations. Are we standing up for our teams, or based on this whole notion that we're all free agents? Are we as loyal to our teams as we should be? Are leaders today as loyal to their teams as they should be? Or are they just looking out for themselves and looking for their exit strategy?
I would hope that if my team was here, they would say that, yeah, I'd stand up for them. I think as I look out over my experience with the many different organizations that I've been with, there are those who will lead and be for themselves. But I think on the whole, that is not sustainable, and those type of leaders won't last in the organization. So you have to be there to support your team, to give them the recognition, to bring them along, because that's what leadership is all about. It's bringing your team along and developing that followership.
Yeah. Right.
I think it does depend on the organization, though, because we can talk about things that apply across the board, and would like to think that our company is a we-oriented company. We try and hire we-oriented people, but there are lots of I-oriented companies that are very successful, and I think it really depends on your organization, your leadership, your kind of who you want to be, and making sure that you're reinforcing those things. And that doesn't mean that we don't have 1 or 2 brilliant jerks running around, but generally speaking, we are trying to hire a relatively homogenous outlook.
Right. Because there are those people all the time where you're like, well, what's wrong with Frank? Oh, Frank's a cowboy. Frank gets results, and so we just kind of leave him alone because we know we would be losing revenue or we'd be losing client relationships. Do we have to be bold and go, you know what? Sorry, Frank, and we're willing to lose the revenue if you're not somebody that's going to kind of play well with others? Does that exist, Lorne, or are the Cowboys still winning?
I have so many experiences where that particular quote jerk that gets great results, that when the organization, the individuals responsible make a decision to remove that person, the organization immediately feels better. And the question people say, what took you so long?
Right.
So there's a lot of sort of false economy around, hey, we're going to lose the revenue. I think that's bogus in a lot of ways.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. There's someone who works for Frank. How are you measuring employee engagement? Bryan, I mean, I know this is obviously near and dear to your heart because what you do really increases employee engagement on your client side. But within your organization, how are you measuring employee engagement?
Yeah, unlike my brethren on either side, we can't really afford Hewitt or Towers Perrin or Mercer,
Yeah.
or, some of the consulting folks that do that. So we use a variety of different measures as proxies for that. One is a relatively obvious one, which is the Employee Net Promoter Score, which is part of our employee survey, and that is basically, are you willing to refer other people to come and work at the company? And we have just under 90% of our people saying that, which is a good proxy for how engaged they are.
Yep.
We have an RFOB measure, which is a client satisfaction measure, raving fans of Benevity. And so if our clients are extremely happy with us, it implies a level of engagement around that. And the third, probably important one for us is quite unique to our business, which is our application of our software is called My Goodness in our company. So we look at the level of participation around giving and volunteering in the company as a proxy as well.
Now, what on your client side, in terms of what you do, what results are you seeing on the personal contribution side and its effect on employee engagement?
It's a good question. I was just talking to Russell actually about that, because ADP is in the human capital management business, and one of the things that is kind of a little known fact is just how impactful community investment, employee giving, volunteering is on the general level of employee engagement and reducing churn. So as we see across companies, and we get to see some pretty cool companies, Google, Apple, Coke, Microsoft, Nike, Oracle. Interestingly, the companies that spend the most in terms of having robust programs around these things have the lowest rate of churn, the lowest cost of recruitment, and the highest average engagement scores relative to some of the benchmarking. So It isn't out there in white papers the way I wish, and frankly, the people who do employee engagement measurement don't necessarily ask the questions that correlate to these types of things yet. So that's part of the reason I'm here.
And is it because they think the organization cares, and I respect that, or is that the organization allows me as the individual to care?
Well, I think the latter is really what has changed, right? And it's, some of these questions we're talking about are the difference between a top-down orientation and a bottom-up. And in this area, it used to be about, let me tell you who we should help, as opposed to who, if you help and we help you help them, will that resonate with you? Will that help create some glue with me as an employer? Will that get your T-shirt on out in the community and those sorts of things? And that's a big change that I think is driven by the millennials and a society that just cares more deeply than frankly my generation.
Yeah. Lorne, what are the biggest barriers to a more engaged workforce? What are you finding?
Well, the reason we're here is about leadership, and that's also the accelerator and also the barrier. Yeah. And we've heard the story before that people quit leaders before they quit organizations, right? They quit their boss, and so that is the leaders that can capture the hearts, heads, minds of the people that work with them. Those people are revered, and people flourish in those environments. And I don't want to oversimplify it,
Yep.
But that's why this is a continuous process of leadership and how we can get better at it.
Yeah. Russ, what is the biggest barrier to at ADP and a more engaged workforce?
Actually, I would tend to agree with Lorne, the leadership. So our engagement, we use that as part of our measurement into our assessment about an individual's leadership capabilities. And the engagement score tends to capture not only that, but it, I think, is a good proxy for it.
Yeah.
No, I was just going to mention that we've grown our net income over 20% year over year last 3 years, and our customer advocacy score is the highest that's ever been. It's the highest amongst any of the financial institutions. But the number one consideration for our leadership, all we care about more than anything else, is what our basket of engagement scores are. That is the driver, and I think organizations talk about that, but you cannot fake that. You have to declare that's the order of importance if you believe it, if you want it to happen. Otherwise, I think you're going to talk about, it ought to be balanced and that kind of stuff. You don't make the choice.
Right.
Got to believe it.
And have your employee engagement scores risen as has your
they're 80. I mean, if you take by one score the annual score, it's 84. It puts us probably the top 5 or 6 companies in Canada at the Great Place to Work score within top 10. Our Glassdoor score is 4.2.
Yep.
So the numbers are there, but it has to be at the front mind of every single person, from the chairman down, including our CFO and anybody who's looking at the numbers.
Yep.
That's number one perspective.
Oh, that's great. That's great. I want to just finish here before we go into the audience for a couple of questions. How can we promote excellence? I don't know. I just find that people want to check the box of innovation, right? Of like, oh, we've got an innovation program. There we go. Or, well, I don't know. We hired a speaker to come in and talk about innovation. Nothing changed. So I don't know. How do we get people to go beyond wanting to be innovative, wanting excellence, and actually doing it? Like rolling up the sleeves, and actually doing it. How are you guys promoting excellence in your organization?
I think on the excellence and innovation side, that's a great question. It's difficult to do. You think about most of the again, I'll go back to the financial processes. They are geared towards year on year doing what you did well last year, which is the same thing, and doing it a little bit better. So that incremental approach. What you have to do, and some of the things that we have done is you one way of doing it is you carve out the ideas and put it aside. So for example, rather than being part of our business, we have an innovation lab in Manhattan that is completely separate, and their sole job is to look at different ideas, bring in, experiment, and we know that not all of that is going to translate into a financial return.
Right.
But the expectation is there, the funding is there, the budget is there, and they are separated from that, so a little bit incubated, so that innovation can grow.
Like a concept car kind of thing, right? Yeah, Lorne?
Yeah, I think there's so much hooey around innovation from the point of view of we're gonna I think it has to be integrated into the culture of the company.
Yeah.
But I think one of the things now, leaders have got to be technologists, and the traditional patterns of just trying to figure out what customers want doesn't work anymore.
Right.
You better know what's coming out there, because there's an Uber out there waiting to take your head out, the financial industry is going to be fully disrupted. So if we're not innovative as a culture, if we're just thinking about nice little innovation tools, we are in big time trouble.
Right. Is that your approach, Bryan, to be the Uber of an
it's
emerging
obviously
category?
a little bit easier for a company of our size to be innovative, and that's really the only reason that we are existing and growing, is that we've disrupted a fairly sleepy environment. But one thing that we do get to do and see in our company is how many large companies operate, and I would say, the level of bureaucracy and administration and fear of change, and some of those cultural things that are almost, it seems, an inevitable product of professional management, seem to be. I mean, there's a reason why companies need to buy innovation. They are suffocated in some respects, and they need to set up skunkworks projects or labs, or and some companies are. Intuit is a client of ours, very very invested in innovation as a pillar of the business, not an incident that's on the corner of someone's desk and stuff. So it's a tough one for us. It's part of our everyday. But you know, I can empathize with the ADPs of the world for sure. I mean, they've got 50,000 employees. To try and turn that ship is a big job for sure.
Nice. Okay, so I'm going to come out. We just got about 8 minutes left. And I noticed as I was sitting, my fly was down. So front row, you just got to say, barn door. 1,000 people with my zipper down. Okay. We're going to come out. If you have a question, rewind. You want to see it. Let's cue the video, Jimmy. No. We have a question right back here. There we go. Can you pass that?
I work in a relatively small organization of what is 40 people, though we've been around for a long time. And I'd love to know what are the, like, it's really nice to talk about like transparency in management and in your philosophies and in all these things that get hung up behind your reception desk and the values and everything else. As you got there, as the organizations you are, what are the top couple of things that you feel that you did that laid the foundation for those successes and those outcomes? What did you do along the way that really made the biggest difference?
You know, earlier I think Russell was talking about the challenge of transparency, and I think when you're starting, I think part of his challenge is ADP is a 77-year-old organization or something. It's very difficult to change a culture, but if you start with a culture that is transparent and communicative and celebrates victories together and celebrates pain. So I try and, I mentioned we're hiring for humility. Part of the reason for that is people who are humble are better listeners. They're intellectually curious. They will share success and be accountable for blame. I mean, you may not agree with that, but it has been our experience. So we work very hard constantly at communication, and even in a 150 employee company, that gets tricky. I can't imagine what it's like in a 5,000 or 50,000 employee company, but you really have to commit to it, and that's what we do.
Something that, go ahead, Russ. Something that really I think contributes is the courage to be intentional and not to try to be everything to everybody. I just heard a presentation from the founder of Janek Chocolates, very small company, growing like crazy, and her commitment is to joy. So before her role as a chocolatier, she thinks about how she brings joy to people. Everybody in the organization has to comply with that particular value, and she's made choices about that. So I think declaring and intentionality is a huge contributor to authenticity and transparency.
So some of the things that I've done, I've worked for smaller organizations as well, and I'm not sure if this will answer your question, but if I talk about what I've done as a leader, as I've grown throughout my career, you know, I sit down with every employee and I talk to them about my leadership style and I explain my expectations that, you know, I manage by exception. I have high standard of quality. We have to have transparency and explain about what that means. And everyone's heard of the golden rule, right? You know, be as to others as you know you want to be done yourself. I recently learned a new term called the platinum rule, which is, you know, treat others as they want to be treated. So it's recognizing how a person wants to be communicated with, how they want to be treated. Talking individually to every single person is something that I do. Even in my current organization, I will meet one-on-one with associates on the front line And those are some of the things that I have done to try to change the culture, improve the transparency, and make sure that every associate, feels engaged.
Awesome. Right here to your left, guys.
So succession planning and leadership development and employee engagement, they all sound pretty nice. Every organization I ever worked for, it was part of the important leadership deliverables. But not every organization was able to deliver it. And what makes it successful is really, I think everybody in this room would agree with me, is really leadership. So my question is, how at ADB, and Benevity, how do you hold leaders accountable for developing their people?
So I understood the question, how do we hold our leaders accountable for the succession planning and making sure that that actually happens? Is that correct?
Yeah, how are you holding them accountable for leading or developing other people?
Yes. Number one, it comes down to leading by example. So if I am the type of leader who will say, hey, succession planning is important, and you must do this, and I put it in your goals, and then you as a direct report, and I don't talk to you about it until a year from now, then clearly that's not going to work. I think one of the biggest barriers and why organizations aren't good at that, because they are very busy and the reward structures are all around hitting the financial numbers, the sales number, the profit, the productivity growth. You have to embed that into the reward structure, because then people will pay attention to it, and because people pay attention to what they get rewarded on. But it also comes down to, we have to walk the talk, and that's what we try to do at my current organization, at previous organizations, so that it becomes ingrained and people understand that it is important. And for example, if you start to promote managers who do not or are not good at that particular succession planning, then that also sends a signal that, hey, you may say that, but that's not that important.
And Lorne, you said that it's one of the three things you look at, right? Is have they developed people that report to them?
Yeah, it's an expected outcome. I just want to add that leadership development, though, is a system. I mean, we've got 50 people here. There's no question that people are expected to get results. They're here today. It's one tiny ribbon of example. You can't fake it. Your lips and feet have to be moving at the same time. When you're talking about it's an entire system, it's how people get acknowledged, recognized, paid, recruited, selected, succeeded. If you don't have the whole system and you just talk about it and you think about it as three courses, forget it. You're wasting your money.
We have time for one final question.
I've been attending the Art of Leadership for a few years now, and a lot of the concepts seem to be fairly similar over time, right? Good leadership means embodying, transparency, collaboration, things like that. My question is, why has it been so hard for good leadership to overtake bad leadership?
Why aren't there more coups?
I'm gonna answer it while these guys are thinking of better answers. I think there's too much confusion between good leaders and good managers. I am a lousy manager, and if these people who are from Benevity want to disagree, but I'm a half decent leader, and it's because I recognize what I'm not great at, what I don't enjoy, and I hire to complement my skill set or the gaps in my skill set. And generally speaking, that's what leaders do. They hire better people than themselves. I've always said I don't want to invest in any company where I'm the smartest person. That would be a disaster. And so that I agree with the comment. I used to come to a lot of these. I haven't in recent years because I'm too busy trying to figure out how to be a leader to actually listen to it. But it is challenging. And if you go to something like this and you take away one or two kernels that you can make actionable, that's what I struggle with some of these things. It's like,
so, yeah, and to build on that, I think the one missing link around accelerating all this is that it's every one of us 1,200 or so people in this room. There's no they out there. And I think sometime when people are talking about great leadership, they're talking about that mythical they. And I think the answer is the action that we take, the self-accountability. Individually, we have, both in terms of our own personal leadership, but the leaders of others. And I think we participate that more and take away the blame of the they about somebody coming riding on some magical horse. I think we'll raise the bar dramatically.
Yeah, and I don't think it's just one thing of why there's not better or more prevalent good leadership. It's a difficult thing, and leadership is a very difficult thing to master. And you taking out all the other factors of, so as a public organization, investors care about the stock price. If you can get there without great leadership, then that's going to be rewarded as well. So there's a number of factors. It's leadership is one component. It is a way to achieve results, and we happen to think that that's the route to go.
Yeah, I'd say, I mean, I don't want to start a dialogue. I guess I just disagree, because I don't know what metric we're looking at that says the bad leaders are still winning. I would say the good leaders are winning. I think we can pinpoint anecdotes within our lives where the bad leader has kind of allowed to continue. But for the most part, when you look at the success of the financial success of progressive organizations who are doing the right things with people who are doing the right things, they're being rewarded financially and they're winning. And those who aren't doing that are losing, unless there's a metric that I don't know about. But I think there was a time when you could fake it till you make it. There was a time when you could kind of, ride the coattails of other people. Those days are done. And finally, the good people are winning.
Yeah, could I add one thing in the spirit of leadership? On the anniversary of 9/11, 14 years later, leaders have the courage to run towards fear. They run, and they run right at it. And if there are first responders in this room, I just want to say on behalf of all of us here how much we appreciate your leadership, because you are incredible leaders. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Keep the applause going. Lorne, Bryan, Russ, thank you very much. Thanks. There we go. Thanks, Bryan. Thanks, Russ.